KRWG-TV presents Minding Your Business, a look at the people, places, events, and issues that impact the business and economy of Southwest New Mexico, with your host, Charles Comer.
Hello and welcome to Minding Your Business, a show where we explore business, economic development, community resources and events, and issues that impact our region. This week on Minding Your Business, we meet with an invaluable community resource, La Pinon. Here to talk about the organization is Executive Director Donna Richmond. Donna, thanks so much for being here.
Well, thank you for inviting me.
So, we always start off to finding out a little bit about our guests. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, where you went to school, what you did before you started with La Pinon.
Well, I've been living in Las Cruces for 16 years now. I was born and raised in New York, and then I left New York to go to college in California.
Where in New York? Sorry to interrupt.
In upstate New York, in Middletown, New York. I was born and raised in the same house.
I hear it's one of the most beautiful parts of the country.
It's very beautiful, but it gets cold there. It gets very cold, and it snows. And
so you went somewhere warmer, California.
Right, California, and I received my degree out of the California State University at Northridge. I have my bachelor's degree in business economics. And I came to Las Cruces after I had my oldest daughter because I didn't want to raise her in California and my mother was here. So we moved over to Las Cruces.
It's probably a whole story and a half hour in and of
That's
itself
true.
why you didn't want to raise your daughter in California. I certainly understand my old friend and mentor Gary Worth not wanting to raise his sons in Zimbabwe, but California, I read Frank Zappa's autobiography, and he had some problems with the public school system, but I actually praise it. Okay, so from California, how'd you end up in Las Cruces?
Well, my mother was living
Oh
here.
yeah, that's right. So and what after that? You come to Cruces? What
I came to
after that?
Cruces and I worked from my home for an advertising agency in Los Angeles, and then I decided I didn't want to be in my house anymore, and I decided to become a volunteer victim advocate at the Las Cruces Police Department. They had a 40-hour training, and I had worked with LCPD through the Police Memorial, which I'm a committee member.
Okay.
And they introduced me to the advocacy program, so I volunteered there for 2 years. That was like '98 to the year 2000.
And you got hooked, didn't you?
I got hooked.
You started seeing those rewards. I mean, it's emotional work, isn't it?
It certainly is. Being a first responder is an emotional job, and being a victim advocate, just dealing with the victims of crime, which victims of crime have, most of the time, they didn't do anything. It's not their fault they were a victim of crime. So I saw in the newspaper that there was a job opening at the Sheriff's Department to be a victim advocate, so I thought I might as well try to get paid for what I love to do, volunteer. So I applied for the job over there and became the victim advocate coordinator at the Sheriff's Department, and I worked there for 2 years.
So two with the city, 2 with the county, and then La Pinon came in the picture somewhere?
Actually, then I went to the district attorney's office, and I worked
there. And you
there
worked as an advocate
there
because they have them there too.
Right, for a year, And then Louise Tracy, who was the executive director before I became the executive director, she asked me if I'd like to come to work at La Pinon because at the time I didn't know, but she was thinking about retiring. So she wanted me to come and work at La Pinon and eventually take over for her. So that's what ended up happening. But my experience at the Sheriff's Department and the DA's office, along with the Police Department, has really aided me in my position here at La Pinon.
I can imagine you know the lingo, and you also know the law side and the order side, to not to be too cliche, but fascinating. So tell us, we're not using the full name of La Pinon. So it's La Pinon Sexual Assault Recovery Services of Southern New Mexico. Did I get that right?
Very good.
It's a very long name. So tell us exactly what is it, outside what it very obviously is from the name.
Okay, we are the only full-service sexual assault, sexual abuse responders in Southern New Mexico. So we provide the counseling services, we provide prevention education, we are first responders with law enforcement. We do the sexual assault nurse examiner exams at the hospital to collect forensic evidence. So we have all of the services for sexual assault victims under one umbrella.
How is the organization, or actually let's start instead with how it's funded. We'll get to that. Tell us the history of
La
the
Pinon,
organization?
we've been providing services here in Las Cruces, Doña County for the past 16 years. We've had our SANE unit for 10 years. And actually, Louise Tracy was the executive director for 11 of those years.
Wow.
So she really grew the program. It was first crisis intervention. That was what they did initially. And then she provided contract counselors to provide mental health services to the victims. She added the prevention program through our coalition. We are part of the New Mexico Coalition of Sexual Assault Providers, and we do receive funding through them to provide prevention education. And then she wrote the grant to start our SANE unit at the hospital.
And we're going to find out more about the SANE unit. So like a lot of nonprofits, you get your money in bits and pieces for those who give you grants, donations, contributions, right. and sometimes for a specific arm of your organization, like the education, like you say.
Right, and we grow our agency, and we start to develop the statistics and keep patterns and track of patterns and
okay.
numbers to support what we write grants for.
So, not one of the many things on top of all your services, you also do record keeping and keep some statistics on sexual assaults in our area, right?
Right, in our area, absolutely, because we have to report to our grant funding sources.
Now, let's talk statistics. I know you've jotted down a couple sobering statistics, and feel free to go to the page if you'd like. Share some sexual assault statistics, maybe even specifically in our area.
Well, I think the first thing for people to know is that sexual assault is not what we would traditionally call stranger rape, where someone jumps out of the bushes and would rape a woman.
Which has traditionally been considered the term rape and now sexual assault. That is traditionally what it's thought of. Okay.
Right, and although we do have those victims are out there and they do exist. We have children, half of our victims are children at La Pinon, the victims that we respond to. And of these children, statistically speaking, the 53% of the children under 13 who are sexually assaulted are males, and they are assaulted by someone they know or a family member. So those are just sobering for us, that the children in our community are being sexually abused, and they are by people that they know and people that they trust. And our prevention education unit is our people. There are 6 ladies that work in our prevention education unit. They go out into the schools and they talk to the kids about body safety and what to do if you have something going on that you know is not right, and who you can talk to, and encouraging them to speak to an adult, speak to someone that they trust.
Now, certainly in my time in elementary school, and that was in the 70s, in the early 70s I went to elementary school, they really shied away from that, but that's changed.
That is changing, and the schools are accepting us. Las Cruces Public Schools, Hatch, Gadsden School District, they are allowing our prevention staff to come in, and we have a set curriculum. And we have different topics that we'll talk about: body safety, internet safety, healthy relationships. We also talk about our Kid Talk program in those presentations, so that everyone is giving the same message. Our prevention staff has different curriculums that they go into the schools with.
Now, have statistics, and I'm just talking trends, not specific numbers, have trends shown that this change in attitude as far as educational institutions, has that helped? Have any numbers dropped at all in these sexual assault figures since the schools have opened their doors to you?
Well, keep in mind, when we're educating the kids, they're coming forward and telling what happened, so your statistics go up and you have more victims because they're coming out and they know it's okay to talk about it. So they're talking about it now. And that's what we encourage families, friends, talk about sexual abuse. Talk about your body parts and what your child would call them. It's not taboo for your child to talk about their body parts.
So in this specific case, seeing the numbers actually make a trend up, that just means we're having better disclosure, better reporting on behalf of the kids, and therefore mission accomplished.
Exactly, yes, yes.
Now, statistically, and you've touched on this a little bit, women do make up the majority of victims, like what you were talking about, stranger rape. But demographically, who else are victims? You said 53% of children under 13 who were sexually assaulted are boys. Any other figures along those lines demographically?
Well, and keep in mind when we're talking about adult sexual abuse, women are more likely to report the abuse. Okay. Men who are being sexually abused because of the stigma in society are most likely to keep it to themselves, not seek help, and not report. And also keep in mind when we talk about sexual assault cases, these are the ones that we know about. These are the ones that are reported. There's so many out there, how can we guess, that are going unreported? And when we think about a 6-year-old child who is being sexually molested by his uncle, I think about who else is out there that hasn't disclosed yet, that hasn't come forward, and we need to reach those children.
Now, then, a message to males out there who may be victims of this: you are someone, La Pinon is someone they can turn to.
Correct. And if a male victim of sexual abuse over the age of 18 would like to report, would like to receive services from La Pinon, they can come to La Pinon. We are not mandated to report to law enforcement. If they just want to receive counseling services, they want information, they want to talk to someone, they can call La Pinon. That does not mean we're going to call law enforcement, we're going to report it to anybody else.
Now, what are some nuts and bolts of the organization? Where is it located? Number of professionals and volunteers? And if you have it, numbers of doctors and nurses involved, because the medical community is really behind you in this organization.
Yes, absolutely. We're located at 525 South Melendres. We just moved there in October. We're actually having a grand opening on Friday, April 18th from 3 to 6 p.m. You're more than welcome to come. It would be nice to see you there. That's where our main offices are located. We do have our SANE unit, which is at Memorial Medical Center. We have 15 staff that work at La Pinon, paid staff. We have 35 volunteers, volunteer victim advocates, who answer crisis calls 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We usually try to have 2 advocates on call, a primary advocate and a backup advocate, because there are times when if I was a primary on call, I may be talking to someone when someone else does call in and need assistance also. So
and that's someone you don't want to keep on hold.
That's true. We want to get back to those people as soon as possible, because who knows how many times they called and hung up before they finally got the courage to speak.
And yeah, I can't even begin to imagine, because I'm lucky like that, and thank goodness there's folks like these volunteers. You had alluded to some training you had back in your earlier days of crime victim advocacy.
Correct. La Pinon provides a 40-hour training to our volunteers. If you called and you would like to volunteer at La Pinon, you would have to go through our 40-hour training first.
Where do they get that?
Our next training's coming up May 31st, and it goes through the weekend, during the week, and then the following weekend, and the 40 hours is fulfilled. We do have some field trips to other community service providers in the area during the week. We go to the SANE unit, we go over to Families and Youth Incorporated so they can see the different pieces of our puzzle to respond to sexual assault victims. And we do have community volunteers come in, like we'll have a detective from the police department come in and talk to our volunteers about what it's like to respond as a law enforcement officer, what they expect from our victim advocates. We have the district attorney's office come in and speak about what happens to the case after the advocates responded and it goes to the DA's office. We have counselors come in and talk to them about the mental health component. So we try to have a full circle training for them so they are prepared. We don't just send them out, okay, you're trained, go respond to sexual assault victims. We do have a shadowing system where if it's my first call, I would have someone go with me, or someone help me with the call. So we do train them, and then we do provide backup for them when they're never alone out there, and they have cell phone numbers for myself, the advocate coordinator, and our previous executive director is still out there, because when you're responding, you need that reassurance to know that you're doing what's right for this victim.
Now, what kind of things do they gather for law enforcement officers? I'm curious about that, because this training sounds invaluable in everybody meshing, because this has got to be a team effort. I'm sure. What kind of things are we talking? Interviews or
well, the victim advocate is there for the victim to make sure that they're comfortable, that they understand what's going to happen next, that they have a choice in what's going to happen next. An adult who is receiving services, and say law enforcement is involved and they're at our SANE unit and they're going to have an exam done. At any point they can say, no, I'm done, I don't want to do this anymore, and because there's different triggers they'll have throughout the procedure. So there is the interview with law enforcement, the interview with our SANE nurse. The advocate is with the victim all along the way to make sure they understand the questions, to make sure that they're comfortable. A lot of times when victims are traumatized, they haven't eaten or drank anything, to make sure that you know, they're taken care of in that respect. Mm-hmm. If there's someone that they need to call, that they want to come over, if they maybe need to go home and talk to their mom about it and they don't want to go alone, an advocate, you know, can help facilitate that conversation, or a conversation with a boyfriend. It's pretty much what that victim needs at that time is what our advocate does. And I've learned over the years what I think the victim needs and what they need may be two different things. So I concentrate more, and our advocates do, about what can I help you with right now? What are you thinking right now? And I always tell the story about a victim that I had that, you know, she was beaten on the side of her face. Her face was black and blue. She couldn't see out of her eye. It was all swollen. I was going to take her to the eye doctor so she could get the medication she needed and the medical attention. And so that's my priority. That's what I'm working on. And as I talked to her, I realized she really hasn't eaten. So I get her something to eat at that time, and then I asked her how food was at her house. Well, she had received a bunch of canned goods, but she had no can opener. So she said, I have food, I just can't open it. So after I dropped her off at her place, and this was when I was with the Sheriff's Department, which is a different response than ours respond, because I am allowed to go to her house with the Sheriff's deputy. So I went and got her the can opener and brought it back. But had I not been talking to her, I would have just thought, let's fix your eye and you'll be fine. But that's not the way it is. So as I've gone on in my years, I realize how to ask certain questions.
It could be as simple as, I need you to go pick up my kids from my mom's
Exactly.
house and take them to my sister's. And I can't even begin to imagine how helpful that is. Now, we've got about 4 minutes to talk, and I definitely want to get into some of the education. Let's talk the SANE program for a minute. You've referred to it a lot, and tell us the acronym again and what the program is specifically.
It's a sexual assault nurse examiner, and these nurses are trained, again, specially trained, to perform sexual assault exams on victims of sexual abuse. We have 6 nurses who are on call, and our advocate would call a nurse and let her know this is the case, and the nurse, based on their training, would determine if she would come into the Memorial Medical Center unit and do an exam. And what it is a collection of forensic evidence to use during prosecution if an offender is apprehended and does result into an arrest and a case prosecuted against them. So they do collect the forensic evidence, and they testify in court, the SANE nurses. They also provide sexually transmitted disease antibiotics for sexually transmitted diseases. Okay. And Plan B, again, at the discretion of the victim. These services are only provided if they would like that part of the exam.
Now, and having that exam done properly is key in prosecution, isn't it?
Correct, because we're talking felony cases, and they use this evidence to hopefully get a guilty plea in these felony cases. I mean, a guilty verdict in these felony cases.
Now, in the minute we have left, let's talk about Kids Talk. Not only sexual assault victims, bullies. You work with bullied kids as well, and Kid Talk is part of that, isn't it?
Right. La Pinon facilitates Kid Talk, which is 636-3636. It's a cell phone that our volunteers carry, and kids call and can talk about any problem they have. A lot of our calls are bullying. Kid pushed me down on the playground. I don't know what to do. Everybody was laughing at me. Or they'll talk about my friend who was my friend yesterday isn't my friend today, and I don't know what I did, and she's being so mean to me.
So just counseling, getting through that rough hump that childhood is.
Right, and letting kids know you're not alone. You know what, that happened to me too, and I know it makes you feel terrible, and I'm sorry that you feel that way, and let's do this or let's do that, and really letting the kids know that they're not alone.
Donna, our time is up, and an amazing resource. I want to thank you and the folks from La Pinon so much for what you do for our community.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thanks for being on. That just about does it for this week. If you have a question or comment about the show, you can call the Minding Your Business hotline at 646-7350 or email me at charlescomer@yahoo.com. Again, I'd like to thank my guest, Donna Richmond, Executive Director of La Pinon Sexual Assault Recovery Services of Southern New Mexico, for coming on the show, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Charles Comer. Here's hoping you have a great one.